Dane had made a lot of mistakes in his life. Smuggling contraband past border patrols, sure. Taking high-risk jobs for low-pay clients, plenty of times. Gambling away his last credits on a rigged station game, more than once. But accidentally ordering a bride? That was a first. The problem started 3 weeks ago when he was rushing through a supply request from an outdated trade hub near the edges of Xeridan space. His ship, the Rusthawk, wasn't in the best condition and he'd been pushing its reactor beyond safe levels. He needed parts, badly. But the station's trade interface was decades out of date, full of mistranslations and glitchy automation. It was a mess of overlapping menus, bad localization, and worst of all, bundled orders. What he had meant to purchase was a multi-purpose maintenance drone. The interface, however, had listed it under a vague category labeled Support Unit. Adaptive, high compatibility, fully responsive. A bit strange, but Dane had assumed it was just poor translation. What he had actually purchased was a woman. And not just any woman, a Vasheri. They weren't common in human territories. A rare, secretive species, most often seen as diplomats, spies, or, more disturbingly, property. The Vasheri were prized for their intelligence, their agility, their ability to manipulate emotions with alarming precision, and for that reason, their people had spent centuries being captured and sold. Dane wasn't an expert on their history, but he'd heard rumors. The Vashari had once been a fiercely independent people, warriors and scholars who had thrived in the jungles of their homeworld, Kalor. Then the syndicates had come, the massive corporate empires that controlled the trade of ships, weapons, and apparently people. Rely was a product of that system. And now, thanks to a stupid bureaucratic arrow, she was his. She stepped off the transport pod with a grace that made his pulse tighten. Her black hair tumbled down her back like liquid ink, shifting with her movements. Her emerald green skin was smooth under the cold, artificial light of the docking bay, but her eyes, golden, slitted, piercing, were what unsettled him most. They weren't the eyes of someone who was afraid. They were the eyes of someone who enjoyed the game. "You must be my husband," she said smoothly, her voice like silk over steel. Dane's stomach twisted. Yeah, about that. He took a step back, resisting the urge to run a hand over his face. He was too tired for this. "There's been a mistake," he said, trying to keep his tone level. A mistake?" she interrupted, tilting her head as if he were something mildly amusing. "Fascinating, because from what I see, you placed an order, and here I am." Dane clenched his jaw. Damn syndicate fine print. He had spent the last few hours fighting the automated system, but every time he tried to issue a return request, the same response flashed on the terminal. No refunds, no cancellations, no transfers. He had even tried contacting a live representative, only to receive a thinly veiled threat about breaching contract agreements. If he abandoned the order, he wouldn't just lose his deposit, he'd owe 5 times the original cost in penalties. Which, considering his financial situation, was not an option. Dane exhaled sharply, crossing his arms. "Look, I don't want to own anyone. I don't—" Rely laughed, a soft, knowing sound. "Own," she echoed, amusement flickering in her golden eyes. "Oh, Tiger, you have this all wrong." She took a slow step forward, and Dane forced himself to hold his ground. "You're not the one in control here." A shiver ran down his spine. Not fear, exactly. Something else. Something dangerous. "Okay," he said carefully. "Then what exactly are you doing here?" "Well," she mused, tapping a clawed fingertip against her lower lip, "according to syndicate contract law, I'm your designated bond mate, which in human terms means I'm your wife." Dane almost choked. He ran a hand through his hair, muttering a curse. "Great! That's just fantastic. You don't seem pleased." Gee, I wonder why. Relay smiled, sharp and knowing. There were 100 different things Dane should have done. He could have left her on the station to let the syndicate sort it out. He could have contacted an independent legal arbitrator, tried to fight the contract on a technicality. He could have walked away and never looked back. Instead, he stood there, looking at her, this impossibly calm, dangerously beautiful woman who seemed entirely too amused by his predicament. And then he made the second dumbest decision of the day. He brought her onto his ship. The airlock sealed behind them with a quiet hiss. The Rusthawk wasn't a luxury vessel, far from it. The corridors were narrow and worn, the lighting flickering in places he hadn't had time to fix. The engine hummed with the low, steady thrum of a ship held together more by stubbornness than good engineering. Relay walked through it like she belonged there. Dane watched her warily, running through every possible scenario in his head. Maybe she'd leave at the next station. Maybe she'd find some other poor idiot to latch onto and disappear from his life. Maybe this would all resolve itself. But something about the way she moved, the way she seemed utterly unbothered by her situation, set off alarms in his head. She wasn't scared. She wasn't confused. She wasn't even angry. She was playing. And Dane? He had a feeling he was already losing. Dane had spent most of his life alone. He liked it that way. Solitude was predictable. It didn't steal your rations. It didn't mess with your ship's systems, and it definitely didn't smirk at you while causing absolute chaos. Unfortunately, solitude had just been violently replaced by Relay. It had been less than 24 hours since he'd brought her onto the Rusthawk, and Dane was already regretting every decision that had led him to this point. The ship might not have been state-of-the-art, but it was his. He knew every inch of it, every quirk of its aging systems, every unreliable panel that needed a firm smack to start working. And now? Now there was a 6-foot-tall green menace treating it like her personal playground. Dane had spent the morning trying to focus on his work, prepping cargo manifests, double-checking the fuel levels, making sure his autopilot wasn't about to dump them into the nearest sun. Meanwhile, Relay had spent the morning making his life a living hell. It started small. She'd wandered into the cockpit, completely ignoring the fact that it was the one place he'd hoped she wouldn't go. She'd perched herself in the co-pilot's chair, stretching out like a lazy cat, watching him with that unreadable golden gaze. "You do all this yourself?" she asked, idly tapping her claws against the console. Dane didn't bother looking at her. "Yeah, it's my ship." Relay hummed, seemingly unimpressed. "Seems like a lot of work for one person." "It is. Maybe you should let me help." That made him pause. Slowly, he turned his head to look at her. "I don't think so." "Well, not?" "Because," Dane said, carefully adjusting a control, "I don't trust you." That earned him a smirk. Smart man. For a moment, he thought she'd drop it. She didn't. While he tried to ignore her presence and focus, Relay made herself at home. First, she started flipping switches on the co-pilot's console, not actually doing anything, just watching him to see if he'd react. Then she found the comm system, and that's when things got worse. Dane had an open communication channel with one of his regular trade clients, a 4-armed Trilvian merchant named Husk. The job was supposed to be simple: deliver a shipment of power cells, get paid, move on. But before Dane could respond to Husk's call, Relay leaned forward, pressed the transmission button, and purred into the mic. "My husband is very skilled with his hands." Dane nearly died on the spot. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Husk's voice crackled through the speakers. "Oh, I did not realize you had bonded." Dane lunged for the controls, cutting the transmission before Husk could say anything else. Then, slowly, very slowly, he turned to face Relay. "What?" he said, his voice tight. "The hell was that?" Relay blinked innocently. What? My husband is very skilled with his hands? Dane repeated, voice rising. She tilted her head, looking entirely too pleased with herself. It's true, isn't it? You keep this ship running all by yourself. That takes skill. Dane pinched the bridge of his nose, exhaling deeply. Do not touch the comms. But it's so boring in here, she complained, stretching again. Then find something else to do. Oh, like what? Like... He cut himself off, suddenly wary. No, that was a trap. If he told her to entertain herself, she'd absolutely do it, in a way that would make his life miserable. Too late. Relay gave him a slow, dangerous grin. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached over and shut off the ship's gravity. Dane's stomach plummeted as he immediately floated up from his chair. Relay! He barked, grabbing at a nearby handrail. Relay, completely unbothered, drifted gracefully, flipping upside down in the air. Oops, she said, voice dripping with fake innocence. My claws must have slipped. Dane gritted his teeth, cursing in every language he knew as he fought his way back to the controls. He slammed the gravity system back online and they both dropped, Relay landing effortlessly, Dane hitting the floor with a solid thud. He groaned, staring at the ceiling. I am going to kill you. You'd miss me, she said smugly, stepping over him. Dane dragged himself up, exasperated beyond belief. I swear to every god in this damn galaxy, if you touch one more... The ship's alarms blared. Dane's heart stopped. Relay raised an eyebrow. That wasn't me. Dane's stomach twisted as he scrambled for the control panel. A red warning flashed across the screen. Navigation failure. What the hell? Dane muttered, flipping through diagnostics. The ship's autopilot had completely reset, leaving them drifting. No course, no destination, just floating. It took him all of 5 seconds to realize what had happened. You reprogrammed the route, he said slowly, a horrible certainty settling in his gut. Relay yawned. Did I? Dane whipped around to glare at her. Where did you send us? Nowhere dangerous, she assured him, just a slight detour. Dane scanned the new coordinates and immediately felt his stomach drop. Oh, you have got to be kidding me, he muttered. They were headed straight for the Zakar Belt, a region known for rogue asteroid fields, black market traders, and pirate activity. Dane turned to Relay, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. You are an actual menace. Relay smiled. I prefer adventurous. Dane resisted the urge to slam his head against the console. If they survived this, he was installing a lock on the cockpit. Dane had one rule when it came to cargo runs. Never screw up the delivery. Cargo was survival. It was the only thing standing between him and a lifetime of debt he'd never crawl out of. Clients didn't care about excuses. If a shipment didn't arrive, he didn't get paid. And if he didn't get paid, So when he checked his cargo manifest and saw that one of his most expensive shipments was missing, something inside him snapped. A slow, cold dread settled in his chest as he turned, locking eyes with the woman lounging in the co-pilot's seat. Tell me you didn't touch the cargo bay, he said, his voice a low, warning growl. Relay stretched like a satisfied predator, arching her back, lazily dragging a clawed fingertip down her neck. Her long, ink-back hair spilled over her shoulders, a sharp contrast against her emerald-green skin. When she looked at him, it was with a smirk that made his blood run hot for all the wrong reasons. I could tell you that, Tiger, she said in that slow, honey-smooth voice. But we both know I'd be lying. Dane's pulse hammered against his skull. He closed his eyes for a brief, fleeting moment, inhaling sharply through his nose before forcing himself to speak. What did you do? Relay hummed thoughtfully, rolling one of her shoulders like she was working out tension. I may have adjusted the auto-remit parameters. Dane stared at her. You dumped my cargo? She arched a delicate brow, amusement flickering in her golden eyes. Not all of it. Not all of it. His voice spiked with disbelief. Relay, do you have any idea how much that shipment was worth? She sighed, pushing off the co-pilot's seat, moving toward him with the slow, deliberate grace of a woman who had never rushed for anything in her life. Her hips swayed slightly, a natural rhythm to her movements that made it hard not to watch. And damn her, she knew it. You're so tense, Tiger, she murmured, stopping just short of touching him. So rigid, so serious. Because I have to make a living, he snapped, stepping back. A mistake. Relay followed, eating up the space between them like it was hers to take. Do you, she mused, tilting her head, or do you just think you do? Dane gritted his teeth. Where is it? The cargo, Relay. She sighed dramatically, then gestured toward the external display. Dane turned and his stomach dropped. The missing crates were floating outside the ship, drifting dangerously close to the upper atmosphere of the planet below. He lunged for the control panel, fingers flying over the interface, scanning their trajectory. They hadn't broken through the gravity well yet, but they were seconds away. If he didn't act fast, they'd burn up on re-entry. I cannot believe this, he muttered, running his hands through his hair. You have any idea how close you came to losing everything? Relay leaned against the console, watching him with infuriating amusement. I wouldn't have let them fall. Oh, really? Dane scoffed, scowling at her. You just planned to hover outside and catch them with your bare hands? She dragged a finger down his arm, slow and deliberate, her nails just sharp enough to send a shiver through his body. I like the idea of catching things with my hands. Maybe you should let me try sometime. Dane tensed, but he refused to react. He needed to focus. Can we retrieve it? She asked, voice suddenly softer. Maybe, Dane muttered, forcing his attention back to the controls. If I can maneuver us into position before we hit Atmo. And if you can't, then I hope you enjoy starving because we're not getting paid. There was a beat of silence. Then, to his absolute surprise, Relay moved past him and activated the ship's external arm controls. Dane blinked. What are you doing? Helping, she said simply. He hesitated. You know how to work a grappling system? She glanced at him sideways, her lips curving into something dangerously close to a smirk. Tiger, there's a lot you don't know about me. Dane didn't have time to argue. He focused on piloting, aligning the ship inch by inch, fighting against the slow pull of gravity. The cargo was slipping lower, barely within range. One shot. They had one shot. Relay's clawed fingers danced over the controls with precise, practiced ease. The grappling arms extended, metallic claws locking onto the crates. Dane held his breath. A second passed, then another. A solid, satisfying lock. Got it, Relay murmured. Dane exhaled, dragging a hand down his face. I cannot believe that worked. She turned to him, looking far too pleased with herself. Was there ever any doubt? Yes, he said flatly, so much doubt. She laughed, and for the first time it wasn't teasing, it was genuine. It threw him off balance. For the first time since meeting her, Dane wasn't sure what to make of her. She could have let the shipment fall, could have laughed at his misfortune, could have used it as another power play in whatever game she was playing. But she hadn't. She'd helped. And that was, unsettling. Dane leaned back against the console, crossing his arms. All right, you win. How the hell did you know how to do that? Relay tilted her head, golden eyes gleaming. I retrieve things for a living, Tiger. It's what I do. His stomach twisted at that phrasing. Retrieve things? She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper now. Stolen things. Lost things. Things that don't want to be found. There was something in the way she said it that sent a slow ripple of unease through him. But then she smirked again and the moment passed. "You know," she murmured, tracing a slow, lazy circle on his forearm with her claw, "for someone who claims to hate me, you let me touch you an awful lot." Dane tensed. Relai leaned in, just enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath against his jaw. "You're not throwing me out of an airlock anytime soon, are you, Tiger?" She was teasing, pushing him, testing him. And damn it, it was working. 'Cause he should have gotten rid of her by now. He should have walked away, should have left her at the last station or the one before that, should done something, anything to break this ridiculous contract. But he... And for the first time he wondered why. The first warning came as a low, insistent beep on the ship's console. Dane barely had a second to process it before the alarm blared to life, the red glow of the proximity alert flashing across the cockpit. Incoming vessel detected. His stomach dropped. He slammed a hand against the controls, pulling up the external scanners. A fast-approaching silhouette emerged from the black void. Small, sleek, built for speed. No official transponder, no markings. "Pirates. Relay," he called sharply. She was still standing by the cargo bay railing, arms crossed, watching him with an expression that was far too calm for a woman about to get them both killed. "Trouble, Tiger?" she purred. Dane gritted his teeth. Shields up, now. She didn't hesitate. That alone told him how serious this was. Relai might have spent the last few days testing his patience, pushing him, playing her games, but the moment real danger arrived, she moved. The shields hummed to life, a thin shimmer of blue energy coating the ship's hull. It wouldn't hold against sustained fire, but it might buy them a few minutes. "Unidentified vessel," a distorted voice crackled through the comms. "Power down and prepare to be boarded." Dane's grip tightened on the controls. He knew how this worked. They wouldn't negotiate. Pirates didn't just want his cargo. They wanted everything. His fuel, his ship's systems, and if they thought they could get a ransom for Relay. No. Dane pushed the thrusters to maximum burn. The ship lurched forward, engines roaring as he dove toward the nearest asteroid field. The stars around them blurred as they accelerated, but the pirate ship matched their speed, gaining fast. Relay moved to the weapons console, her golden eyes sharp. "They're going to fire." "Not if I get us into the rocks first," Dane muttered. "You sure about that?" "Not even a little." A flash of blue energy streaked past the cockpit. The first shot missed. The second did not. A violent impact rocked the ship, sending Dane slamming forward into the controls. The hull groaned under the pressure, warning lights flaring across the display. Shields at 46%. "They're trying to disable us," Relay said, hands flying over the weapons console. "Yeah, well, they're doing a damn good job," Dane growled. The asteroid field loomed ahead, jagged and unpredictable. It was suicide to go in at these speeds, but slowing down meant getting ripped apart. "Tiger," Relay murmured. Dane didn't look at her. "What?" She leaned in closer, her breath warm against his jaw. "Let me handle the guns." His fingers tightened on the throttle. "You know how to fire plasma turrets?" Her lips curved into something wickedly dangerous. "I know how to hit things." Dane cursed under his breath, but pulled his hands away from the weapons control. "Fine. Don't miss." The moment he let go, Relay moved. She took the seat beside him, legs crossing gracefully, fingers dancing over the targeting system like she'd done it 1,000 times before. And then she fired. The first shot grazed the pirate ship's wing, forcing them to veer off course. The second hit dead center. A small explosion rippled across their hull. The pirates didn't slow down, but now they were wary. "Not bad," Dane muttered, dodging between two massive asteroids. "Try not to hit the rocks while you're at it." "No promises," she purred. Dane barely had time to curse before the pirate ship opened fire again. A direct hit slammed into their rear thrusters. The ship shuddered violently. The controls flickered under his hands. They were losing power. We can't outrun them, Relay said. You need to lose them another way. Dane's mind raced. The asteroid field was dense, full of debris, small gravity pockets, and hiding places. If he could time it right. Hold on, he warned. And then he killed the engines. The sudden loss of thrust sent the ship spiraling, momentum carrying them forward in freefall. Dangerous, Relay said, voice sharp now. Trust me. The pirate ship shot past them, expecting resistance. Dane counted. 1, 2, and then he punched the engines back on. The ship lurched, and Dane threw them into a hard roll, weaving dangerously between the asteroids. The pirate ship tried to follow, but they were too fast. One wrong turn, one miscalculation, and the pirates slammed straight into a massive chunk of rock. The explosion lit up the void. Dane exhaled sharply, fingers loosening on the controls as the shaking finally stilled. Silence settled over the cockpit. Then, a low, breathless laugh. Dane turned his head just in time to see Relay grinning. "Not bad, Tiger," she murmured, voice silk-smooth with something dangerous underneath. "Not bad at all." He let out a slow breath, heartbeat still pounding in his ears. "You could sound a little more concerned. We almost died." "Almost," she echoed. "But you don't strike me as the type to die easily." Dane turned back to the console, muttering, "Could have fooled me." Relay shifted, standing from her seat. Then, without warning, she leaned down, placing her hands on either side of his chair, caging him in. Dane went completely still. Her golden eyes flickered, taking him in. "You're shaking, Tiger." "Adrenaline," he muttered. She tilted her head, voice dropping to something nearly sinful. Or is it something else? His pulse spiked before he could stop it. She smirked. "Relax," she murmured, trailing a single claw lightly along his arm. "I don't bite." She let the silence stretch before leaning closer. "Unless you ask nicely." Dane jerked away, scowling. "You are the worst person I have ever met." Prelay laughed, soft and amused, stepping back gracefully. "And yet," she said, turning toward the exit, "you still haven't thrown me out of an airlock." Dane watched her disappear down the corridor, heart still hammering. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if he was still fighting her or himself. Dane was at his limit. Not just because of the near-death experience, not just because of the pirates, the chaos, or the constant aggravation of dealing with a woman who took nothing seriously. It was her, Relay. The way she moved through his ship like she belonged there. The way her golden eyes gleamed with amusement and something darker every time she pushed him. The way her voice, all velvet and honeyed danger, wrapped around him like she could see right through him. He could handle enemies, he could handle debt, bad jobs, and the endless grind of survival. But he couldn't handle her. And she knew it. She knew it. The air between them had been thick since the escape. The adrenaline hadn't faded, and neither had the tension. She had leaned too close, touched him too much. And Dane had let her. That was the part that unnerved him the most. Now, as he stood in the dimly lit confines of the ship's engine bay, pretending to fix a system that didn't need fixing, he was trying, desperately, to shove the thought of her out of his mind. It wasn't working, because he felt her before he saw her. A slow prickle of awareness ran down his spine as the quiet hum of the ship's systems was interrupted by the softest of footsteps. He didn't turn. Didn't have to. "Hiding from me, Tiger?" Her voice was low, knowing. Dane exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the console as she moved behind him. "Not hiding," he muttered. "Working." Relay's nails grazed the back of his shoulder, feather light. "You do that a lot. Work, fix things, tinker." He was closer now, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body at his back. His pulse kicked up. "That's how ships stay in the sky," he said, voice tight. "And yet," Relay murmured, her fingers sliding down his arm, slow and deliberate. "You seem more off balance than ever." Dane swallowed hard. She was toying with him, he knew that. He'd known it since the moment she'd stepped onto his ship. Rely liked the chase. She liked to see how far she could push him, how much tension she could wind into him before he snapped. But this wasn't just a game anymore. It had been inevitable, really. He'd spent days pressing against his control, unraveling it strand by strand. The way she talked to him, the way she looked at him, like he was the puzzle she couldn't wait to solve. And now she had pinned him against his own damn ship, and he was dangerously close to giving in. Realized breath ghosted over his ear. "Tell me something, Tiger." Dane finally turned. A mistake. Because she was right there, looking up at him with that infuriatingly knowing expression. His back hit the console as she took another step forward, trapping him between steel and her. "Why do you fight it so much?" she whispered, tilting her head. Dane's jaw tensed. "Fight what?" Realized clawed fingers traced the edge of his jaw, tilting his face slightly, like she was studying him. The heat between them was undeniable. She could feel it. He could feel it. And Dane, for all his resistance, for all his stubborn denial, was done pretending it wasn't there. His hands moved before his brain caught up, gripping her waist, pulling her flush against him. Realized breath hitched, but she didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned in, her lips parting slightly, a silent invitation. And Dane took it. He kissed her. Hard, fierce. The moment their lips met, the tension between them snapped like a live wire. Realized sighed against his mouth, her fingers sliding into his hair, gripping tight. She kissed him like she had already won this battle, like she had always known he would give in. And maybe she had. But right now, Dane didn't care. Because she tasted like warmth and wildfire, like trouble he should run from, but never would. Her claws dug into his shoulders, a sharp reminder of what she was. Something dangerous, something untamed, something he could never own but might never escape. Dane deepened the kiss, pouring every ounce of frustration, tension, and longing into it. And Rely? She let him. She met him stroke for stroke, fire for fire, until the only thing left between them was heat and breath and the undeniable fact that this was happening, that it had always been leading to this. When he finally pulled back, both of them breathing hard, Rely laughed softly. "Finally," she murmured, her thumb tracing his lower lip, "I was beginning to think you had more self-control than I gave you credit for." Dane's fingers tightened on her waist. "And I was beginning to think you'd eventually stop pushing." She grinned. "You should know better by now, Tiger." His chest rose and fell, still trying to catch up with the reality of what just happened. But he wasn't going to regret it. Not this. Because for the first time since meeting her, Dane wasn't fighting her anymore. And maybe that was exactly what she'd been waiting for. Dane woke to the hum of the Rusthawk's engines, the quiet, rhythmic pulse of a ship that, against all odds, was still in one piece. For a moment, he didn't move. His mind was still tangled in the memory of her lips against his, the heat of her body pressed into him, the way she had sighed into his mouth like she had been waiting for that kiss as long as he had. It wasn't just that he had wanted her. It was the way she had responded, like she wasn't used to being kissed like that, like no one had ever touched her without trying to own her. And that realization unsettled him more than anything. Dane ran a hand over his face and forced himself to sit up. Rely wasn't beside him. Not surprising. She was never where he expected her to be. With a sigh, he pushed himself off the cot and made his way toward the cockpit. He found her exactly where he should have guessed, in his chair, feet propped up on the console, staring out into the vast, endless black of space. She didn't turn when he entered, but he felt the shift in the air, the way she was immediately aware of him. "Stealing my chair now," he muttered, leaning against the doorway. Realize's lips curved. You weren't using it. Dane crossed his arms, watching her. What are you doing? Thinking. Her voice was different, not teasing, not smug, just quiet. Dane frowned. That's dangerous. That earned him a soft huff of amusement. For a long moment, she didn't say anything else, just stared out at the stars. Then, finally, she spoke. Did you ever wonder why I was up for sale? Dane's breath hitched slightly, caught off guard by the sudden shift. He hadn't expected her to bring it up. She had avoided the subject since the moment they met. He exhaled, stepping further into the cockpit. I figured you'd tell me when you wanted to. She tilted her head slightly, her long, raven-black hair slipping over her shoulder. And if I never wanted to? Dane leaned against the control panel beside her. Then I'd never ask. She studied him for a moment, golden eyes searching his face. Then she turned away. I wasn't born into some noble Vishari house, she murmured. My people used to be warriors, but that life ended long before I was born. Her voice was strangely devoid of emotion, but Dane could hear the weight behind the words. He stayed quiet, letting her speak. I was raised in a syndicate facility, she continued. They called it a training center. What they meant was a prison. A chill ran down his spine. He had heard stories, rumors, syndicate trafficking rings. Children raised in captivity, trained for whatever role would make the most money. Some were turned into servants, spies, assassins. Others were sold to the highest bidder. Dane's fingers tightened against the panel. I was useful, Relay said, voice quieter now. Fast, smart. I learned to fly before I was strong enough to lift a weapon, and when I was strong enough, they taught me how to fight. She lifted a hand, studying her claws absently. Some of us were lucky, she murmured. If you were valuable enough, they trained you. If you weren't, you didn't last long. Dane felt something dark twist in his gut. How did you escape? Relay smiled, but it wasn't a real smile. I killed my trainer, she said simply. Stole a ship, never looked back. She said it like it was nothing, like it wasn't the defining moment of her life. But Dane wasn't fooled. He watched her, waiting. After a long silence, she exhaled. You want to know the funny part? She asked. I fought my entire life for freedom. Did things I don't regret, but probably should. And then I wake up one day and find out that, apparently, I belong to you. Her lips curled, but there was no humor in it. That's irony, isn't it, Tiger? Dane felt his chest tighten. He had spent days resenting the contract, the ridiculous fine print that had dumped her into his life. But for her, it was worse. You don't belong to me, he said quietly. You never did. Relay's fingers drummed against the console. That's what makes you different. Her voice was softer now, almost thoughtful. Dane turned toward her fully, watching the way she studied him like he was something she couldn't quite figure out. And then, before he could think better of it, he reached out. Not to trap her, not to claim her. Just a simple, quiet gesture. His hand brushed her cheek, fingers trailing down her jaw. Relay went still. For once, there was no teasing smirk, no sly remark, just a quiet, uncertain tension. She swallowed. What are you doing, Tiger? Trying to remind you, Dane murmured, his thumb skimming along her lower lip, that you don't have to run anymore. Her breath hitched. For a moment, he thought she might pull away. Instead, she leaned into him. And Dane, to stupid, reckless Dane, closed the distance between them. The kiss was gentler this time, softer, but no less consuming. Relay sighed into his mouth, a quiet, breathless sound that sent a sharp current of heat straight through him. Her hands slid higher, skimming over his chest, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt before slipping underneath. Dane sucked in a breath. his muscles tightening as her nails dragged lightly along his skin. She was exploring him, slow and deliberate, like she wanted to memorize every inch of him with her touch. And it was ruining him. Dane had never been the type to lose control. He had spent his life calculating risk, avoiding complications, keeping himself at arm's length. But Relay was not an arm's-length kind of woman. She was fire, untamed and unapologetic, and right now she was pressing him against the cockpit console, owning the moment in the way she always did. Except this time, it wasn't a game. This time, she was letting him see something real. Her golden eyes were dark with hunger, but there was something else there too. Something raw, something unspoken. She had spent her life fighting for control, and yet right now she was giving it to him. Dane's breath came rough and uneven as Relay shifted, swinging one leg over his hips, straddling him with the kind of unhurried confidence that made his head spin. She settled against him, warm and impossibly close, her hands braced on his shoulders. For a moment neither of them moved. The air between them hummed with something electric, charged and waiting to ignite. Then, slowly, she leaned in, her lips grazing the corner of his mouth, not quite a kiss, just a tease, a whispered promise of something inevitable. "You're tense, Tiger," she murmured, her voice silken and knowing. "Relax." Dane huffed out a breath, half a laugh, half a curse. "You're on top of me. How exactly am I supposed to relax?" Brûlé smiled, tilting her head, her fingers tracing slow, lazy patterns along his collarbone. "You could start by touching me back." Dane's hands, which had been gripping the edge of the console like it was his only tether to reality, finally moved. He slid them up her thighs, over the soft curve of her waist, the smooth expanse of her back. She was warmer than he expected, her skin like heated silk beneath his fingertips. Relay shivered slightly, her breath hitching as his hands tightened on her hips. She liked that. Dane filed the knowledge away for later. Right now, he was too focused on the way she was shifting against him, pressing closer, the way her nails dug in just slightly as she kissed him again, deeper this time, slower. She tasted like something dangerous and addictive, something he already knew he wouldn't be able to quit. Dane's grip tightened, fingers digging into her waist, and Relay moaned softly against his mouth, a quiet, involuntary sound that shot straight through his defenses. His control snapped. With a low growl, he shifted, gripping the back of her neck and tilting her head back, deepening the kiss until she was gasping against him, melting into him. Relay let him. She let him take, let him devour her like he had been starving for this, her body arching into him, demanding more. Dane wasn't sure how they ended up on the floor of the cockpit. One moment she was on top of him, in control as always. The next, he had her pinned beneath him, breathless and laughing, golden eyes flickering with something dangerously close to delight. Finally, she murmured, trailing her fingers along the nape of his neck, nails scraping just enough to make him shudder. "I was wondering when you'd stop holding back." Dane's forehead dropped to hers, his breath coming ragged and uneven. "You are impossible," he muttered. Relay smiled against his mouth. "And you love it." Dane didn't deny it, because the truth was, he did. The hum of the Rusthawk was steady beneath Dane's hands as he guided them through open space, the planet below shrinking into a distant glow. They had survived. Again. But something was different this time. For the first time in as long as he could remember. Dane wasn't just thinking about the next job, the next fight, the next way to stay one step ahead of disaster. No, this time, he was thinking about her. Relay sat in the co-pilot seat, her legs tucked beneath her, watching the stars with an unreadable expression. The golden glow of her eyes reflected in the glass, distant yet sharp, like she was studying the universe itself. She looked like she belonged there. And maybe she did. Dane exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. "So, what now?" Her gaze flicked to him, a small smirk pulling at her lips. Is that your way of asking me to leave, Tiger? You know that's not what I meant. She stretched lazily, the movement drawing his eyes to the way her shirt slipped from one shoulder, revealing the smooth green skin beneath. Dane clenched his jaw and forced himself to focus on the controls. We could go anywhere, he said, glancing at the nav system. You ever thought about that? Not just running, not just surviving, actually choosing where you want to be? Riley was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, in a voice lower and softer than before, she said, I never had that choice before. Dane turned to her fully, studying her face. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the stars. Not with wonder, not with longing, with hesitation. It hit him then. This was new for her. She had spent her entire life running, surviving, taking what she could before the universe could take from her first. The idea of choosing something for herself, of having a future that wasn't just about escape, that was terrifying. Dane swallowed. You do now. At that, Riley finally met his eyes. And for the first time since he'd met her, there was no teasing challenge, no smirk, no guarded amusement. It was just her. She studied him like she wasn't sure if he was real, like she wasn't sure how to believe him. Slowly, Dane reached for her. Not to claim, not to demand, just a simple, quiet gesture. His fingers brushed along her jaw, tracing the curve of her cheek before tilting her face toward him. She didn't pull away. If anything, she leaned into his touch. Her lips parted slightly, a slow breath escaping her, not out of frustration or exasperation, but something else entirely. What are you doing, Tiger? She murmured. Trying to remind you, Dane said, his thumb skimming along her lower lip, that you don't have to run anymore. Riley exhaled sharply, her body tensing beneath his touch. But she didn't move away. Instead, she tilted her chin up, pressing into his hand like she was testing the reality of it. Dane didn't push. He let her decide. And after a long, heavy pause, she kissed him. It wasn't rushed, wasn't desperate. It was slow, deliberate, unshaken. A choice. Dane let out a quiet breath, pulling her closer, his fingers sliding into her hair, his grip tightening as he deepened the kiss. Riley sighed into his mouth, her hands trailing down his chest, slipping beneath his shirt, her nails raking gently against his skin. She was exploring him again, mapping every inch of him like she wanted to memorize him. Dane groaned, breaking the kiss just enough to rest his forehead against hers, his breath uneven, his pulse hammering. You're dangerous, he muttered. Riley laughed softly, her fingers still tracing slow, lazy patterns along his stomach. And yet, you're still here. Dane pulled back just enough to look at her, and what he saw nearly knocked the air from his lungs. Because for the first time she wasn't hiding. Not behind teasing smirks, not behind playful deflections. She was just Riley. I'm still here, he echoed, voice quieter now. A statement, a promise. Her lips curved, but it wasn't playful this time. It was something softer. Something real. Dane exhaled sharply, running a hand down his face. All right, tell me something. If you could go anywhere, anywhere at all, where would it be? Riley hesitated, golden eyes flickering. And then, after a long moment, she said, I don't know. Dane nodded, thoughtful. Then let's find out together. Riley blinked, caught off guard. Just like that? Just like that. She studied him for a long time, and for once, Dane let her. Then slowly she smiled. All right, Tiger, she murmured. Set a course. Let's see where this takes us. Dane smirked, turning back to the controls. For the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't just flying toward the next job. He was flying toward a future. And that was worth everything.